Hi guys, my name is David and welcome back to my channel. Today I am going to be discussing my favourite books of last year of 2021. I was supposed to make this video last month in February, but it kind of got away from me. I did actually film it once before, but for some weird reason I wasn't happy with it. Maybe it was too long, so I just deleted the footage and I'm just doing this again. So like my worst reads of last year, which I will also have a link down below in the description in case you want to see what my worst reads were for last year. These are only going to be my opinions only. If you hate any of these books, that is fine. Just remember going forward guys that this is only going to be my opinions and thoughts on these books, but these ones I would recommend highly to anyone and everyone. And of course I've got all videos for them, so I will have all that stuff linked down below in case you want to see what my opinion is for a specific book on this list. So I'm not sure whether I said already, but these are going to be in order. So number 10 is I wouldn't say my least favourite, but I had to put these in some sort of order, so you get the point with that. And number 1 is my absolute favourite book of last year. So number 10 is The Complete Poetry of Edgar Allan Poe. This was a really short book, as poetry is kind of goes over my head. I'm not sure what I make of it, and obviously I know who the author was. I found it cheap and I thought, okay, I'll give it a go. I obviously heard about his popular one called The Raven, which was actually in that book, and biggest surprise of last year, I really enjoyed it. I give it a 5 stars out of 5, and I said in that video and I'm going to say it again, who knew that I would like a book about poetry? I'm currently on a mission right now, which I've done a whole series for, where I am going to be reviewing every single one of Edgar's tales, and when I get to his poems I will be grouping some of them in kind of like a little groups, maybe 5 poems, and talking about them individually. So yeah, number 10 is The Complete Poems of Edgar Allan Poe. Number 9 is also a very big surprise, as I wasn't anticipating to like this book as much as I did, and that is The Planet of the Apes by Pierre Boulle. This is pretty much the same as the original Charlton Heston movie. Well, half of it is anyway, as it kind of is a mashup of all the films that you have. So the Charlton Heston movie, you got the Tim Burton movie, and also the prequels as well. So if you mix all them up, you pretty much get this book. I don't have to explain what this book is about. It's about an astronaut really that goes and lands on a planet where it's completely inhabited by intelligent apes. Also, fun fact as well, that over here in the UK it was actually called Monkey Planet. Number 8 is The Last Wish by Andrzej Sapkowski. I probably butchered his name, but this is book 1 in the Witcher series. After I watched the first season on Netflix, I really enjoyed it, so I got the book and I read it based on that one season. This is about a monster hunter called Geralt, who is a rogue, to put it bluntly. He is paid to dispose of monsters and demons and creatures of otherworldly origins that are harassing and causing all this havoc amongst all these villages that he goes to along his travels. And this was not a linear story, this is a short story collection, so it kind of gives you a taste about who Geralt is as a character, how he fights, how he interacts with people, because he doesn't go into a situation with a monster with all guns blazing, even though he's got 2 swords. He has a conscience. He goes in there at first wanting to maybe have a talk to them, and then if it goes wrong, he can actually kick ass. But I really enjoyed The Last Wish. I was extremely disappointed that season 2 of The Witcher didn't focus on the second book in this series, which is called The Sword of Destiny, because I wanted to read that and then watch the series. But Season 2 is actually focused on the third book, which is a novel, and that is called The Blood of Elves. So I will probably be reading Sword of Destiny and Blood of Elves back to back. Number 7 is Nightmare by Chad Nicholas, and this is a horror book, and this is about a man who has to overcome the traumas of what happened to him as a child. And it's a very unusual book. It's a very difficult book to explain, but if you are a horror fan, I would highly recommend that you read Nightmare. Chad has actually written another book called Shade, so I could have easily put that on here, but Shade, even though it's a really great book and I really enjoyed it, I wanted to be fair and I thought that Nightmare was only slightly above Shade, but only slightly. They are both really excellent reads. Number 6 is Shelter for the Damned by Mike Thorn. This is another self-published book by a author that I've become a massive fan of, and this is a horror book focusing around a small group of boys that go into an abandoned cabin or shack in the middle of nowhere, basically just to muck about and have a smoke and all that stuff. But what one of them actually discovers is that this building is not necessarily what it appears to be. It's more of a gateway to another dimension. It was written in such a great way. Yes, the main character is kind of a dick and he's really unlikable, but it's kind of nice to read a book that's not about a goody-goody two-shoes. So I'm actually a fan of Mike's work now. I'm actually currently reading his most recent novel or short stories called Peel Back and See. I'm only about 4 or 5 stories into it, but I'm really enjoying it. But Shelter for the Damned, I would, once again, like Nightmare, I would highly recommend that if you are a horror fan, or if you are trying to get into horror, or maybe cosmic horror, because this is what this novel is, recommend it. I would really recommend that you read this book. It is excellent. Number 5 is The Rithmatist by Brandon Sanderson, and this was a very interesting book, as I have read not a massive amount but a good amount of books by Brandon before, such as Snapshot, Skyward, The Final Empire, which is book 1 in the Mistborn series, and also The Way of Kings, which is book 1 in his Stormlight Archive series. But The Rithmatist is a YA fantasy novel focusing around a magical school that everyone that goes there, or the majority of students that attend this school, have the ability to draw these chalk monsters and have all these duels with each other, these fights. No one gets hurt, but it's pretty much like a more elaborate way of playing, all these Pokemon cards or Magic the Gathering cards or whatever, which I've heard that Brandon is a fan about. And this book had all diagrams and pictures in it, and in this book all these students are being targeted and killed because of their talents, and it's kind of a whodunit. And what I liked about this book is that the main character, he desires to have something. I won't say what it is in case you want to read it, but Brandon could have taken the easy way out and say, right, look, this character's going through these trials and he wants to get this achievement, and then okay, we'll actually give it to him because he's going all through these trials, so okay, we'll reward the character and we'll reward the reader for going on this journey. But no, the character, or our main character, when he goes through all these trials, he is denied what he most desperately desires or wants at the time anyway, and that was a massive surprise that Brandon took that route. So far this is a standalone book, but I would like it if there was maybe a second book in this series, but it could be read as a standalone and it could be enjoyed for what it was or is. Number 4 is Erebus by Shaun Hutson. This is a real good horror book. It's extreme horror, so if you're very squeamish about any blood or any violence or taboo subjects, then I would probably steer clear away from Shaun, because that's what he writes, that's his jam, that's what he does. But Erebus focuses around a farming community where all these farmers are giving all their cattle, pigs and horses and cows and whatever, all this new feed that's been invented and made up by this factory and this organization. And it's supposed to increase the time that the animals actually grow bigger and fatter and all that, so the farmers can get more profit from what they do. But what it results in is these animals becoming blood-sucking and flesh-eating monsters that eat each other. And when the people of this town eat this contaminated meat, they also too become these, it's described as vampires, but they're more of a cross between vampires and zombies, and this town gets completely infested with them. It's a really great story. Yes, it could have been shortened down if the characters went down this path instead of the path that they did in the book. It was enjoyable. I really had fun with it. I really did. Number 3 is The Return of the King by J.R.R. Tolkien. Don't have to say anything about this book. Everyone knows what it's about. I started doing my first ever buddy read on the first book in this series, or this trilogy, where I read the first book with Kayla Lenzen, and I wanted to experience this book with another reader. And last year I actually read The Two Towers and The Return of the King, so I could have picked either one, but I chose to pick Return because it's the conclusion. It's supposed to wrap up everything in a nice bow, and it was I wouldn't say a joy or a pleasure, but it was a very comforting end to a series, or a trilogy rather, that I started with my first ever buddy read. And if you have watched any of the movies, the Peter Jackson movies, the extended versions, they do not even come close to what's in these books. But Return of the King was an absolute joy to read. I really enjoyed it. It was a real comforting read, so that's why it's on number 3 on this list. So getting down to the last 2. So the second book that I really enjoyed last year was a reread, and that is Good Omens by Terry Pratchett and Neil Gaiman. I really enjoy this book so much. It will never get boring, no matter how many times I read it. It will never get old. I will never ever stop finding joy and pleasure from reading it. And if you have never read any fantasy book, or if you're trying to get into Terry Pratchett or Neil Gaiman, or both of them, I would start off with Good Omens. It isn't complex to understand, and it mashes up both their styles very well, even though I haven't read many books by either of these authors. But this focuses around an angel and a demon that are living on Earth, and they discover that basically heaven and hell want to have a fight with each other, so they unleash the Antichrist on Earth. And both the angel and the demons, Crawley and Aziraphale, have to overcome this because they don't want basically the world to end. It's a very funny book. It's a very serious book at times, and it also has witches in it, so what else can you want from a book? So, number 1, what is my favourite book of 2021? That would go to my first ever book from this genre, and that is Grimdark. And the book is The Blade Itself by Joe Abercrombie. This was my favourite book of 2021. Even though this book is excellent and extremely enjoyable to read, it doesn't have much of a plot. It only has about 5% of it is actual plot, and it's more of a character driven story. It's supposed to give you a taste and a flavour about, right, this is this unforgiving world that we are in. These are these characters which are extremely entertaining to read about and go on this journey with them. You are never confused about who's who or what everyone's actually called or what they're actually doing. And it's very dark, and it's a very, very good fantasy book. I did actually read last year Before They Are Hanged as well, so I could have included that one here as well, but I'm putting Blade Itself. I'm not saying that Before They Are Hanged isn't any good, it is, but I had to choose one, so I'm choosing the first one. But If you want, you can put both of them together in the #1 list, or the #1 position rather. So yeah, that's just my top 10 books that I read for last year. Let me know if you've actually read any of these books. Let me know if I've maybe encouraged you or inspired you to read any of these books. And as I said, if you want to watch any videos about any of these specific books to get my in-depth thoughts about them, all spoiler free guys, so no worries there. All the links will be down below for each and every single one of these books. So with all that out of the way, have a great day, read some awesome books, and I will see you all in my next video.